Okay, guys. So you had challenged me, some of you had challenged me to have a different perspective. And one of the hallmarks of psychological flexibility, which is a pretty good skill to have, especially in situations when black and white thinking may actually not be too helpful because some things are black and white, some things are not, knowing the difference. Okay, so with some of the people posing alternative things to consider, did have a bit of a insight. And again, not saying it's true, not saying that this is really what happened. I think it's an interesting perspective, and I'll just say it. Okay. So to the commenter who said that perhaps Harry was devastated, uh, not only with a decade of Eleanor, if she was a beard, but also with Louis being in a family way. So that's basically when Louis was announced that he was going to have a child. So, and I don't want anyone talking about how it's not his kid because I will block you. Um, I've talked about this before. So, long story short, I think. Oh, my here's the theory. So, you know how if you Google creepy love stare and then you do a Google image search, which I learned from a lot of you veteran fans on Tumblr, the images that pop up are pictures of Harry like staring at Louis, and there's a lot of older videos of just how he would look at him in like the really early days of the band. And there were people who said that if Larry's not true, then they really worry about Louis and he should maybe get a restraining order and maybe Harry should see a psychiatrist, kind of like a joke. Because if you really look at how Harry is staring at Louis, it's pretty intense. Um, I still believe that, that Harry was just devoted to Louis. And there's so many reference points about Louis that I don't think are pleasing, they're not baiting. But I I have heard of men doing this. I don't whether they're gay, straight, bi, whatever. But I have heard of men and also, maybe to a lesser extent women, not that I think women do it any less. I just think we don't hear about it as much. That when their first really serious relationship devastates them, that they can either have a number of responses. Some become like really achievement oriented and they overwork and hyper independent. Another one is also they can become almost like, yeah, they can kind of, what the word is, hoe out, right? Like, or they just become hypersexual. And it's one way to manage emotions because like not just not just chemicals, but some behaviors can be a way to anesthetize the emotions. So I I, I think that perhaps Harry was really, really devastated at the thought of the white picket fence possibly being with someone else and Louis about to be a parent and just all that surrounded that. So, not to say that one situation or scenario negates Larry, it doesn't. And I think he was very devastated by it. That is why the lyrics to Kiwi make complete sense. That in all that devastation, because when this happened, it was 2015, 2016. It was after Zayn had left, and there was that Good Morning America interview where the male host congratulates Louis, and then the female host, sort of in that conversation, kind of says, "Oh, hey, Harry," because Harry's so quiet, and Harry says, "Oh, I'm great," and he looks subdued. Uh, so I think one, Harry was super devastated about Louis becoming a parent and all the all the you know uh, hoopla that surrounded that. I think that he was just devastated beyond belief. And then it was so here's the vulnerability point: is the band is negotiating this hiatus. There was obviously opportunities presented to Harry about um, becoming solo, and it was the perfect point of, if you wanted to hook somebody, as the big bad music industry goes, that would be the perfect time, because they're already predisposed to being a people pleaser, wanting to be liked. They've gotten a really big taste of fame. They want more of it. And what what can really give your self-esteem a real, um, what could really devastate your self-esteem, for anybody, even the most confident people, uh, sort of your partner betraying you in a way, and the partner that you've grown up with, that you shared so much together. So then you're already predisposed to wanting to be liked, and it's like a huge rejection that can devastate your self-esteem. And you're barely 21, 22, and you have what they call a reaction formation, where you just decide to find something to focus on so that you redirect your energy, and you don't have time to feel how sad it is. So sometimes distraction is good, but too much of it, you don't ever get a chance to really heal the wound. You just kind of distract and distract and distract. And so, yeah, you're offered the world. You're offered, hey, you're going to get $20 million marketing budget, all this stuff. And it's presented to you when you're maybe, one of the lowest points in your life. And keep in mind, you're in your early 20s, the identity is starting to take shape, and it's sort of a loss of innocence, because this love's been sort of, it's been shattered temporarily. And yeah, you would take it, because it's like, oh great, it's a bit of, I'll show you. It's B, distraction. C, a chance to maybe redefine yourself, because your heartbreak makes you present to just how much your sense of self relied on that person being your person. So, and plus all the media around it. For a private citizen, that alone would be hard. But for somebody that's in the fishbowl, it's like amplified. And so there's the vulnerability point. It's almost like proximity of time. So the whole hairy kind of going in the opposite direction of kind of this very sweet boy, and this much more masculine presenting person, suddenly distancing himself by having this really hypersexualized image, by getting into all these projects, not just a solo career, but yeah, the acting stuff, and then the hosting stuff, and doing a performance at the Victoria's Secret show, travel, 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 travel. Getting into the fashion partnerships, all that stuff, right? So yeah, the busyness helps, and then there's there may have been a bit of a, I'll show you. And when I say oh wow, I don't necessarily mean they're going to be with all these other people, because we don't know. Um, but just being almost in your face about it, and sort of becoming kind of the opposite of the you know cosmopolitan man about town, really hypersexual. It's almost, you become the very thing that your partner didn't like, or was, they would have protested it, and all the uh, anything that they kind of stood for. I- I've seen people do this, like they just kind of become the opposite. They start dyeing their hair purple, and like, it's quite interesting, because here's your chance to be your own person, and here's also your chance to show them up. And I never want to rely on you again. So it's like a perfect cluster. So that's where I, in an alternate sort of theory, is, because I've been on the last couple days I've been on, oh my God, like, you hurt Louis and you're an opportunist and all this stuff. I'm not negating that. I think people are so complex, and all sides can exist in a person. It's just the percentage of which that's an expression of a reaction versus their true nature. And the true nature, we will never know. We don't know these people. So it lines up, I think, that he basically hoed out with just this presenting image, this fashion sense, this kind of like provocateur, uh, because it's like it filled all these things: identity, opportunity to be independent. I'll never be vulnerable and need another person again to define me. And also, like, well, the hell with you, my first true love, because you betrayed me. So now I'm going to show you. And it's, it's got the characteristics of what somebody in that age group could likely do. Not all people in that age group do that, but it kind of lines up, right? Probability wise. Because even people who get divorced when they're like middle age, sometimes they have this, they have the midlife crisis, and you're like, who are you, right? Um, trauma can make us behave in ways that we may not have foreseen ourselves doing. Um, Maybe when we're older, there's less percentage of people that would do that, but he was just an emerging young adult. So that is my perspective with people who've challenged me on it, because I don't like to stay in a fixed position. If someone can present with me alternative information, and the alternative information is usually something would have to be something that's concrete, that is evidentiary, right? So so then this would explain why Harry is he looks kind of like the light in his eyes went out, because number one, you're not with your Louis. Number two, Louis now is in a different phase in life, which is permanent. Like, he has a responsibility that is like, it's one thing to be responsible for your siblings. Eventually they grow up and they have their own families, like his sister. But it's one thing when it's your own child, because that's lifelong and at least 18 years. So here is Harry now, almost 10 years later. So let's see, 2017 was the first album. They broke up in 2016. So yeah, we're looking at like 8, 9 years. So here he is, almost a decade since. He's been, working really hard between music and making movies and all the hosting gigs. Busy man, busy man. And then won a Grammy. But all the busyness eventually ends, because you got to sleep, because if you're not sleeping, you're not going to be able to produce. Number two, all the attention doesn't really help. Number three, the Grammy, it's great, but Grammys don't tend to heal heartbreak. They can make you feel better, though, that you got one. Um, and just this whole rich life he's living, and yet the light in his eyes isn't there. So if you did all this stuff to make you feel better, it probably worked a good deal. But then the heartbreak, if time time does heal old wounds, but at the same time, it's what you do with that time. So if you're just in reaction and distraction and like intellectualizing, and I'll be fine, or thinking that this will make me feel better. Yeah, yeah, and then you never get to the wound. It's kind of like a wound that's never properly treated and then bandaged up. It's just kind of covered up, but it's not actually given the ointment that it needs. And so there's this juxtaposition of him having all these achievements, and him having all these really successful, high profile, uh, prestigious collaborations. And yet he went and sought out My Policeman, and kind of acted out a part that people who believe in Larry say is kind of the Louis part, which makes sense. So I don't know if maybe My Policeman was sort of his way of courting Louis back. I mean, there's so many interpretations for that. But if you look at that, and on this discography, the achy, the melancholy, uh, just doesn't have the joyful beam. It's like he's worn himself out. But I think that in 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 the solution that he came up with to deal with everything around the band ending, and Louis having a new phase in life and feeling possibly very, very betrayed, um he probably, on some level, he's like, I do want to hurt you because you hurt me. Like, it's it's the anger is really grief. Like, you listen to anger long enough, it becomes grief. It could have been that. And so it's sort of like with all these successes were little jabs at Louis, but at the same time, when you have downtime, especially during the pandemic, um, you actually think about it because there's not enough things to distract you. So that's sort of what I feel could also be a viable reason why there is what another poster said seems to be mutual guilt on both sides with these sort of parallel lyrics. So, but the sad lesson here is when you hurt the person you love. Sorry, it cut me out. So, when you hurt the person you love, you actually hurt yourself just as much, if not more.